It's a new dawn, it's a new day. My name is Ocean Lemon, you can call me Jay, and today I'm going to talk about something I care about, but a lot of you probably don't. Now, as a person that loves video games, as you can clearly see by my Ada Wong tapestry in the background, I also have one over there because I love Ada Wong and I love Resident Evil, especially Ada Wong though. As a gamer and someone that loves games, I love PlayStation. I grew up on the PlayStation 1 while all my friends in school had like the PS3 and had Blu-ray and stuff like that. I always grew up on older stuff, and I'm very glad I did. And one of the older things I grew up on was the PlayStation 1, which I played the hell out of as a kid. It was my main console as a kid. I played a lot NES because that was my secondary console, and my third console was technically the Wii and maybe even the Nintendo 3DS, but mostly and most of my time looking at a TV screen was usually either watching some sort of show or just playing the PlayStation 1. So I have always had some sort of bias or favoritism towards Sony because I love the company and I think they do a really good job with a lot of what they do. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that I'm just not gonna shit on them or call them out when they do something stupid. Which is why I'm making this video today. I want to talk about why Sony kinda sucks now, and why it disappoints me. Also, if you can't tell by the way I look, I am a bit sick right now. I look like death. But anyways, let's get back to the point of this video. Sony is one of the largest companies in the world, and they have been a huge driving force in entertainment technology for decades. Sony is responsible for nearly every form of physical media, as they have had their hands in the cassette, the 8-track, the VHS, the Betamax, which we do not talk about, the DVD, the Laserdisc, the HD DVD, which we also do not talk about, the Blu-ray DVD, the HD Blu-ray DVD, 4K, Ultra HD, Blu-ray, whatever. They've had a lot of things that they have created or had their hands in creating. The point is, Sony is kind of the god of the entertainment industry, as they not only control a lot of physical media, but they also have dominated the video game industry as well. Alright, buddy. Let me take it from here. Sony first dipped their toes into gaming in 1994 with their brand new PlayStation, a console that took the world by storm and even started to compete with already established companies such as Nintendo and Sega. The console was pretty powerful at the time, but the reasons that it sold so well was because of its controllers and its games. Controllers for consoles at the time were very weird. They were usually just a flat piece of plastic with a few buttons on them so that you could do your combos on Super Mario or Tekken or whatever. While the controllers worked fine, Sony ended up taking this a step further. They would actually add some proper handles to the controllers to make it a lot more comfortable for the players, and also the controllers were durable as all hell. 4 years later, they would update the controllers with the introduction of the DualShock. A controller with 2 joysticks was very unheard of at the time, and this would become such a popular thing that not only Xbox would steal it, but also Sony would continue to be making the DualShocks even till this day. The games are also a real selling point for the console. While they may not have looked as good as the Nintendo 64 or the Sega Dreamcast, they ran a lot better and were more comfortable to play. Sony would also have exclusive titles for their console that would help sell the console even more. Games like Gran Turismo, Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid, Crash Bandicoot, and even Resident Evil are a big reason why people went out and bought the PlayStation, even though Sony was an unheard of company in the gaming industry at that time. Not only did these games make the console a gem and a big staple in the gaming industry, they also continue to be some of the highest rated games of all time. And while a lot of, actually most of the credit should go to these game developers and game studios that made these games, a lot of credit should also go to Sony for making a platform that could help all these devs bring their ideas and dreams to life. Without Sony, we may have never seen Crash Bandicoot come to life, or have been able to play as Jiggly Jill in Resident Evil. The PlayStation 1 has brought me some of the best times of my short little life. Watching my dad play Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit and struggling to do the 90-degree turn throughout the town. Me and my dad taking turns driving through the streets of Chicago on Driver 2. Me as a literal infant playing Resident Evil 2 and being scared to death while also simping for Claire Redfield and her pixelated butt. All hail caked up Claire. And with all that, I say, thank you, Sony. like everything, shit got bad. While Sony continues to dominate the industry even still to this day, a lot of flaws started to happen over time. While the PS1 was perfect and the PS2 outsold every console even though it was very underpowered, especially compared to the Xbox, the PS3, PS4, and PS5 eras were not as perfect. First, with the PS3 being released as an overpriced fire starter that would not only melt the console itself, but also melt your hopes and dreams. People were paying $600 for a console that would literally implode on itself trying to run a PS2 game. It got so bad to the point that Sony actually took that backwards compatibility feature away 100%, which obviously a lot of the world did not respond well to. The PS3 being able to play PS2 games was such a high selling point for gamers because a lot of people at the time were making the switch from CRT TVs to HD TVs, which HD TVs you can't really play a PS2 on. A lot of you have probably noticed when you try to play a PS2 game on a PS2 on an HD TV, it just doesn't look right and it's very dark. Trying to play Resident Evil Code Veronica is like trying to find your keys at night in the dark in a cave while blindfolded because you cannot see anything that is going on. And the reason for this is because the PS2 was actually made for CRT TVs. They were not optimized for HD TVs because they weren't even a thing at the time. They were specifically made for CRTs. So being able to use a PS3 to play these PS2 games and actually have them look better and look the way they should was a very high selling point and a reason so many people actually bought the PS3. PS3 also struggled with a lot of security issues, as in the PS3 era so many people had their PlayStation accounts hacked and their consoles hacked and their information stolen. Like, it was a very big deal during this era and would even carry on into the PS4 era for a little while. Also, the PS3 was seen as the most powerful console to ever exist at the time, yet it still managed to run a lot of games worse than the Xbox 360. Now, my time with the PlayStation 3 was very short-lived. I got my very first PlayStation 3 in March of 2024, and it died in August of 2024. Now, I don't know if it died because that's just what PlayStation 3s are known for, or for the fact that the pawn shop that I got it from that claims they refurbish their consoles and clean them didn't actually do that. Instead, when I opened up my PlayStation 3 after it died, it looked like somebody was using it as an urn. But in my short time with the console, I was actually very pleased. I grew up always thinking that the PS3 was a joke just by what I heard a lot of people say. Everyone that I was surrounded by as a kid, like in school, always said that the PS3, while it was a fun console and there were some fun games on it, it was kind of a joke compared to the Xbox 360. But in my time with it, I was actually very pleased and happy with it. While some games ran poorly on it, I was happy with Grand Theft Auto 4 being on it because it actually ran way better than I expected. I always grew up playing Grand Theft Auto 4 on an Xbox 360, which doesn't run very well on a 360, but when I put it into my PS3 and played it, it was actually very great. And I got to play it online, which was something that I wanted to do for like over a decade, and it was a very magical experience being able to play one of my childhood favorite games online for the very first time on a PS3, and I loved that. But moving on to the PS4 era. The PS4 era for Sony was a lot better in terms of performance. They built a console that was made to last, and it was a console that on launch was actually able to play the games that it launched with perfectly in the way that it should, which is something that did not happen with, of course, the PS3. The console is so powerful that even games that are coming out now, over 11 years after the console was released, are still being released on the PS4. And that's something that is really good about the PS4, honestly. But obviously, that cannot be said with every game. In my experience, games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and the Resident Evil remakes really push this console to its limits. While the games don't necessarily run bad and they actually run pretty smooth, the problem is when you put these games into your console and actually try to play them, it will make your console sound like a Boeing trying to take off. Like sitting next to your PS4 while you're trying to play one of these games kind of makes it feel like you're Tom Cruise in Top Gun, because it seriously sounds like you're in a plane. But with that being said, I feel like that's a lot of credit to Sony here, because even though the PS4 sounds like it's struggling with these games, it's still able to run them very well and at a high frame rate, at least for a console. If it can run a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, which is honestly probably the best looking and most beautiful game to be out right now, actually ever, I can't think of another game that looks as beautiful as Red Dead Redemption 2. If it can run that game very smoothly while also sounding like it's about to die, honestly, that's a great thing for Sony there, because it shows that they made another console that is very powerful and also very durable. But you know one thing that isn't great about the PlayStation 4? Storage. And this is something that would carry over even to the PS5 era. The storage for the base PS4 was 500 gigabytes, which you may be thinking is a lot, especially compared to the PS3, which had 20 to 40. Well, this actually isn't a lot, especially when you take into consideration the size of games now. During the early part of the PlayStation 4 era, games took up around 35 gigabytes of storage on average, and by the end of the PlayStation 4 era, we are seeing games that are coming out that are anywhere between 70 gigabytes to 300 gigabytes, which means you have to be very calculated with your game library, or just continue to delete and reinstall games whenever you feel like it. Now, if you don't want to deal with the hassle of having to re-download and delete games over and over again every time you want to play a different game that isn't already installed on your PS4, then you can go ahead and give Sony a little bit more of your money to buy an external hard drive, which really sucks because these things are not cheap at all. But this became a lot worse in the PS5 era, because the base PlayStation 5 has around 800 gigabytes of storage on the internal hard drive. Now, 800 gigabytes might seem like a big step up from the previous 500 from the last generation. However, it is not a big enough step up at all when you consider how big PlayStation 5 games are. So 800 gigabytes on a base PS5 isn't really going to be able to hold very many games, especially for a lot of the gamers that are using their PS5 to play a lot of PS4 games, because maybe their PS4 died, or maybe they just don't want to deal with the PS4 anymore. So once again, just like the last console generation, you have to manage your storage, and you have to constantly delete and reinstall games whenever you need to. But just like the PlayStation 4, if you really want to avoid all that hassle, you can of course fork out more money to Sony by buying another external hard drive. Oh, but what's this? There's a catch? This $129 external hard drive doesn't actually work for your PS5 games, so you cannot actually play your PS5 games straight from the external hard drive. Instead, you have to copy the data from the external hard drive and move it back to console storage every time you want to play it? What? So if you actually want more storage to hold your PS5 games and actually be able to use it as the way it should be intended to use and be able to play PS5 games off said hard drive, you have to fork out another $250 to buy an internal hard drive? What? Which means now not only do you have to give Sony more money, but now you have to open the console yourself and risk breaking it just to put the internal hard drive in, which means if you break your console, you're gonna have to pay Sony another $500 for a new one? What? That's so cool. So that means you have to pay almost over $1,000 for the chance to play some good exclusives? But wait, what's this? A lot of these exclusives that you want to play, you may not be able to play without a PlayStation Plus membership? What? Oh, and that's not all. For the PS5 to actually work as a PS5, you need a good TV that has HD 4K resolution? What? Wow, so you're probably gonna pay around $2,000 to play a crappy exclusive on the PlayStation 5? Wow, thanks Sony. Sony taking money from people that they probably shouldn't be taking is nothing new. But it is so egregious in this era that it's not even funny. A lot of games are hidden behind a PlayStation Plus paywall now, which means if you want to play these games and have access to them, you must subscribe to PlayStation Plus, but not only PlayStation Plus, no. A lot of these games you need a PlayStation premium subscription to be able to access these games. And even after you access these games, you can't really ever own them because you constantly need a internet connection and a PlayStation Plus or PlayStation Premium subscription active. A good example of this is Dino Crisis, a game that came out almost 30 years or something ago on the PlayStation 1. This game recently got ported to the PS4 and PS5, which it's still the PlayStation 1 version, but you can access it on your PS4 and PS5 console, which I think is actually a very cool thing. However, to be able to access this game when it came out, you had to have, of course, a PlayStation Premium subscription to be able to download this. And even after you download it, you can't play this game offline. You must have your internet access 100% all the time. And you also must have your PlayStation Premium subscription on 100% of the time, which honestly is very scummy, especially considering a physical copy of Dino Crisis on the PS1 is anywhere between $70 to $150. So if you don't already own a physical copy of this game, then you either have to pay that high price to get a physical copy, or you're forced to pay Sony a few bucks every month. By a few, I mean a lot. Sony made a lot off of these PS1 and PS2 titles as they purposely made the PS4 and PS5 not backwards compatible with PS1, 2, or 3. So if you want to play those old games on a PS4 or PS5 and you already have the discs for them, you cannot use them. Instead, you have to wait for Sony to re-release it on the PS5 on the digital store, which means whether or not you already own the game, you're gonna have to buy it again, which really sucks. I rarely praise Microsoft, but one thing that I love about Microsoft and Xbox is the fact of how much they prioritize backwards compatibility. They give gamers a choice of either buying a brand new digital copy of an old game, or if you already own the game on a previous console generation on disc, you can just use that disc on your new console, which I think is amazing, and I really wish Sony would do something like that. But Sony taking as much money as they can from the consumers was not the only problem with the PS5 era. Another problem is that they straight out lied to consumers on launch. When the PS5 launched and they announced it, they said that the PS5 would have 8K capabilities, being able to play movies and games at 8K resolution, which if you've been living under a rock, that turned out to be a complete lie. And it wasn't even a problem that they lied about it at launch, but they even had the audacity to put it on the box. If you have an old box from the launch or near launch versions of the PS5, you will notice that it says 8K right on the box, which is a complete lie. What really infuriates me the most is, at the end of it all, it really doesn't feel like the PS5 was worth it. While I love my PlayStation 5 to death, I have so much fun playing it. I usually use it for PS4 games that run so smoothly on it, and the PS5 games I do have also run so smooth. I do feel like there is a big question on whether or not the PS5 is actually worth it. It's hard to justify paying such a huge price to get a console as optimized as possible when there isn't even a really big, good game library for it. Like I said earlier in the video, the early PlayStation consoles had such a big and exclusive game library to said consoles that it made you want to own them. But that really cannot be said with the PlayStation 5. All we are getting now is mishandled sequels or just crappy reboots or remasters that nobody wanted anyways. While a lot of this should be put on the game studios, I feel like a lot of the blame is for PlayStation and Sony themselves. Because it's hard not to look at Sony and be very disappointed for how much they take from the consumer and don't really give back. The exclusives for this console are not that strong, and they are very few and far between. While games like Gran Turismo 7 and Spider-Man 2 are absolutely amazing games, there's really not much left after that. And a lot of this is due to PlayStation Studios, a gaming company that makes games under the Sony and PlayStation name. They used to pump out so many bangers back in the day. They were essentially very close to Rockstar Games on how just quick and awesome their games came out. But nowadays, all they focus on is Marvel games and MLB The Show, which is very disappointing. It no longer feels like they have that drive to make these great quality games that take the world by storm that are great on their consoles. Instead, it feels like they waste their time, or at least prioritize their time, on trying to make the best console in the world, but also just leave the games to gaming studios and not worry about it themselves, which is a very bad thing for Sony. If Sony isn't making great exclusives, then they are kind of kneeling down to the level of Xbox. Meaning there isn't a need to choose one over the other, especially when there's no exclusives for either that are appealing. When the best games on your console are also on the Xbox and Switch, it really is hard to justify even wanting to buy a PlayStation 5. It really feels like Sony's lack of making exclusives in the PlayStation 5 era is really just them kind of evening the playing field, even though they clearly have the advantage. They made arguably the greatest gaming console and most powerful gaming console ever, and they have nothing to show for it. Having a PS5 kind of feels like having a $200 million mansion, but inside that mansion, it's just a bunch of furniture stained in dog piss. Now, over the last 2 years, there have been big rumors that PlayStation is trying to acquire Halo from Xbox, and even trying to get some rights for Mario from Nintendo, which both of those sound super dumb, but also I wouldn't mind it. But instead of doing that, I feel like the best thing for PlayStation and Sony at this point would just be to go back to making good exclusives. I know that it's not an easy thing to make a video game good, okay? But Sony has had such a knack for it over the years, and it just feels like they lost that magic. Like, all they have to do is just make another Gran Turismo, or make another game with such an impactful story and such a good game in general that can compete with the likes of The Last of Us and God of War. While Sony has clearly won the console war as Xbox waved the white flag years ago, the one who lost the most in all of this was us, the consumer. Because at the end of it all, we ended up paying higher prices for a console with less games, and now we have to wait more years for games to come out. The old fans that have been a die-hard fan base for this company and have stayed loyal to the company have lost. The newcomers into the gaming industry that are trying to find a brand new console to play so that they can have their first experiences with gaming have lost. At the end of it all, we all lost. But anyways, I don't know how this video will turn out. It's going to be a lot of editing, and I don't know if it's going to look good. Also, it's hard to make videos when I'm sick. I'm gonna be real, it's a hard thing to do. But anyways, thank you all for watching my video, for those 3 people that did. And if you want to see more like this, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Anyways, I'll see you people in the next one. Bye.